occasionally. This is a presentation that we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365, the security benefits of being in that cloud platform. We're going to talk a little bit about trends that we're seeing as an organization. We're going to tell some stories, and then we're going to talk specifically around what Microsoft is doing to help create a better environment for customers. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Pearl and kind of some of the things that we've been doing. But as always, it is an open discussion. I appreciate you guys for joining in. If at any point you've got a question and you want to just kind of pop in and say, oh, excuse me, do that. If you've got a comment that you want to add to it, also good. If you just want to type something in the chat box, you can do that as well. And Cindy will alert me when we got that kind of thing going on. So I've kind of set this up to where we have a chance to everybody to collaborate, and that's really my goal here, is to have some good discussions, and maybe learn something new as part of today. If not, it's always a good reminder to be thinking about some of the things that are out there today. So everybody on the call today is part of what we would call a small to mid-sized business, right? And we're very used to the stories that we see in the headline news. And Barb just shared a story, for those of you that were on, where her voice provider has gotten hacked, and they're having issues actually getting calls and two-way audio to come through into their office. It's a great example of things that make the news, right? You've got the pipeline hack that was last year. You've got retailers that they're getting compromised, municipalities, hospitals, the big players tend to make the news. But what we don't see a lot of is, the small business owner just got breached, and they had to pay a ransomware, or they accidentally transferred money they shouldn't have, things like that. But those are a huge part of where the threat actors are focusing in on today. The average cost of those breaches is over $100,000. It's a pretty big deal. And the overwhelming consensus is that small business owners are running their business, right? They're good at maybe helping people move from one place to another. They're maybe good at creating a piece of software. They're good at delivering concrete or something along those lines, right? So that's what small business owners are focused in on. They're not going to have an in-house staff of experts to combat or to prepare for those cyber threats. So those are things to keep in mind as you're a small business owner, is that partnering with someone who is absolutely dialed in to what's going on inside of the cyber world that we're dealing with today is an incredibly important piece of your business plan, if you will. Ralph and I are reminiscing 20 years ago, right? So thinking back, it used to be that all you really had to have was a firewall and some filtering on my email, and I've got an antivirus program that's running and taking care of me. And that was great when we all had giant CRT monitors, and the only way you got to the internet was through a modem or a really slow T1 line or something like that. And you're good to go. But what's changed, right? And over the last 20 years, we've all adopted these little devices that live with us, and we take them, and they're at the soccer match, or they're in the store with us, or they're in the coffee house. But you've got tablets, you've got mobile devices, and you've got very portable computers. And then we've also introduced corporate data that lives in the cloud. So thinking about some of the features of 365 around SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business, Teams, all those products are allowing people to do work and be productive outside of that four-wall corporate environment. And that's amazing, right? I love it. I love the ability to be in multiple places and access my OneNote, which is where I keep all the data that I'm collecting as I go through my day, and taking advantage of that cloud environment. But it opens up a ton of threat points and a ton of areas where criminals can come in and attack those end users, right? So we've seen a huge uptick in phishing attempts. So for those of you that aren't aware, but I'm sure most people are, a phishing attack is one where someone comes in and maliciously tries to convince a user to click this link or follow this, follow this thread down to a certain point where then they're able to gain what's considered what we call privileged access to one of their accounts. And that could be privileged access to your local computer. It could be privileged access to your email. Phishing, though, has gotten crazy sophisticated. And it's really probably what I would consider the biggest point of entry that people have. I think the statistic is 90 to 95% of attacks are coming in through phishing, something like that. Ransomware, for those of you that aren't aware, is something where a malicious threat actor will come in and attack your files and encrypt everything to where now I've got to either recover from a backup or I've got to pay that ransom in the hopes, and there's no guarantees, in the hopes that they give me the key to unlocking my data, which is that's a pretty business impactful situation. As we kind of think about the way these things have matured, we really do see people doing this as a way to finance their livelihoods. So if you look at some of these fun stories here, these are very real. And we had customers, and I'm going to tell one story that I love, and the names are changed, and no one's going to understand who I'm talking about necessarily, but this is really what's happened. One of the individuals at this organization that was at a higher level, a C-suite type person, their credentials were compromised. Now we had, we'll talk a little bit later about advanced threat protection. We're going to talk about multi-factor authentication and a couple other things. But the reality of it is that those things hadn't been implemented yet. And those credentials were obtained by somebody that was malicious. This person logged into their environment and just watched. And they watched for weeks. And as they're watching, they're realizing that, oh, this person's in the middle of a project. This person is doing transfers of payments to a vendor. Let's go ahead and figure out how we get that payment. So they were able to craft an email at the exact perfect time, change some rules in the back end. And what ended up happening is the accounting people changed the routing numbers of that payment. So it's a fully legitimate situation, and the payment got transferred over into a malicious account. The only saving grace was the dollar amount was so large they couldn't get it out of the country. And a week later, the FBI got involved and was able to return that money back to them. But the reality is it was gone for a full 7 days. And it was a big dollar amount. If I told you, you'd be like, oh my gosh, but huge dollar amount. And it's really these kinds of stories and the other stories we're seeing here on the page that really highlight the fact that these threat actors, this is their business. They're over in other countries a lot of times. They're literally orchestrating ways to come and get our money, right? It's not necessarily malicious. I want to disrupt your files and things like that. The phone thing, I'll give you that. That's probably to disrupt a little bit, but really what they want is they want the money that's being paid out to decrypt those files. They are making a living off of our inability to recognize attacks and the inability to stop them. There's this entity called the dark web. We'll talk about that a little bit later on too. But it exists, and it's there developing software and developing basically an Amazon marketplace for people to purchase the ability to phish and to hack and to ransom other people throughout the rest of the, what I would call first world country type scenarios. Greg, do you have anything you want to add to that? Greg Smith is on the phone. I forgot to pause earlier and see if
no, you're doing a good job. I think you're really nailing it, Floyd. I mean, the reality is that from years ago, people were focused on those larger companies and back-end type of attacks. And today it's really about email. And that's what today's webinar is really about, how you're being attacked on email and how we can protect you. But that is the number one place people are going, especially at small companies, because we're naive, we're trusting, and we want to, we're thinking and assuming people are doing things right, and they're so sophisticated that they're able to find creative ways. And Floyd nailed it. It's really just a money grab. They're not really trying to ruin you. They just want to get in and get as much money as they can from you and really move on.
Yep.
And it's volume business now. It's not just trying to get into one company. And clearly they're doing that too, right? You see these big data grabs around social security numbers, whatever else, that is definitely still happening. But the big trend and the money grab is really around small companies when they can get to millions of them at a time and create sophisticated platforms and processes and lots of different things to hit us and you through email in semi what looks like legit ways. Floyd just described one of them, and we have several of those scenarios from customers. And so today is really about what's the next step to help you protect email and your users, and how do we do that? So that's what you're going to see coming up too.
Yeah, and we're really, you know, that is absolutely, we're going to be focusing a lot on that. But it triggered a thought in my head too, though, when you said that is that the trend from Microsoft, if you think about the Teams platform and other communication platforms, their goal on some level is to take the communication that traditionally was always happening with email and move it into a platform that is more secure to your corporate entity and things like that. So they're giving you other avenues to keep you out of that email on some level as well. But the email is such a huge part. I mean, how many emails have I gone through already today? And some of them are valid and things I need to talk about, and other ones are clearly not valid. So 365, just circling back, the statistic I had, and this is great. Microsoft processes close to 500 billion emails every single month. Let that sink in. 500 billion emails a month. Okay. For those of us that realize that there is a benefit to let's call it where you've got a large data set, right? When I've got a literally big set of data to work with, the bigger the data set, the better my statistics and better my understanding of that is going to be. Well, if I'm processing almost 500 billion emails a month, and I can use that information to identify, oh, this is malicious. Oh, this is not the way it should be. Oh, this is coming from somewhere that is known to be a threat. And then let's take on top of that I have over 3,000 security professionals at Microsoft whose job it is to make that environment better. This is why we are a Microsoft Cloud solution platform provider, because we've seen the benefit of being part of that Microsoft stack over the years. We've seen how they've taken this, what used to be completely developed for enterprise, right? So you think about the word Exchange Server, it's just email. But when you were a corporate entity, you had your team of professionals and they were in charge of this email environment and things. Well, as a small business owner, I don't have resources to put one person completely dedicated to my email server, let alone a team of 3,000. That's the benefit of being part of this larger, what I would call ecosystem that Microsoft's created inside of 365. They've done an amazing job, though, of not just taking email, but then integrating it into a bunch of productivity applications. We'll talk a little bit about some of those later on. But their goal is to create this solution platform for everybody, so that you can, pick your level that you need to be inside of from a licensing perspective, and then being able to do more work and maybe not more work, but be able to do what you're doing better as part of that platform, right? We all need some way to communicate with our customers and with each other within the organization, and Microsoft's done a great job of putting that together. So we'll circle back to the products and things like that as we go through some of these scenarios. So this is the very first one that I wanted to bring up, and it's phishing. And the stat is between 90 and 98%, it looks like, of all cyber attacks happen to start with phishing, right? The actual attack could cost a company up to $80,000. So that's next month's webinar that Greg's going to be leading.
That's right.
But it's all about cybersecurity and insurance. And people look at that and it's getting more and more expensive. And we've got some opinions. We've got an industry expert from insurance that's going to be jumping in and talking with Greg about that. But it is one of the 15 points that we address when we talk about cybersecurity assessment, is that, yes, we want to do everything we can do to prevent a malicious activity on the end user's desktop. We want to prevent your data getting stolen. But at the end of the day, that umbrella of insurance is super duper important. So, but I love phishing attacks, suspicious emails. We all get them. And what I love about it is I'll get emails from people that are just corporate contacts that say, hey, do you think this is spam? Or do you think this is legitimate? And you look at it and the craftiness of it is amazing today, right? They're doing a great job in making it look very, very convincing. But I don't think I've ever answered, yes, you should definitely click that link to anybody that I've talked to. So what's great about the 365 platform is there's certain add-on products. And what I wanted to point out to everybody on the call today is that if you're receiving a lot of phishing attempts that include what I would consider questionable links or questionable attachments, and those are not getting filtered out, we need to have a conversation. So I need you to reach back out to me or my team and make sure that we are dialing in your protection at the right level. Microsoft gives us flexibility to go all the way from basic to super duper advanced. And depending on the client, we don't think there's a one size fits all for every single user in every single organization. So Microsoft gives us the flexibility to pick and choose which licensing level we need to take advantage of for different folks. If you're a C-suite, you're accounting, you're human resources, you're dealing with secured financial information, you need to be at the upper tier. If you're just somebody that checks email once or twice a day and it's not part of how you do work and you're not dealing with a lot of sensitive information, you could maybe be more down in the basic or standard levels. So, but Microsoft provides these tools that will go on and literally go through your emails as they're coming through and making sure that the attachments and things that you're getting through are legitimate to the best of their ability, right? So this product called Advanced Threat Protection or Defender for 365, they keep changing names on me all the time, but it helps you protect against those sophisticated malware attempts. And not every one of our customers has this enabled, but I got to be honest, a lot of them that have seen the advantage of having that in place. And it's not a super big add-on, but it does help provide additional visibility and additional protection into those emails that are coming through. You've got the ability to control IPs and source and destination emails as well. So again, if you've got a lot of these malicious emails that are coming through, and you're kind of like, man, I've gotten good at combating against them and ignoring them and things like that. That's great, and I'm super happy that you've got to that level. But not every user is that savvy, and it only takes one distracted moment for somebody to say, oh, I forgot that I wasn't supposed to click that, and privileged access is gained, and then we've got a recovery situation on our hands. So take advantage of my team, making sure that we've got things dialed in as close as we can. It's not going to get rid of everything, but it's definitely going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that you've got in there. I mentioned it earlier. I did want to just flip on back to it real quick. Multi-factor authentication. I think looking at the list, I'm pretty sure everybody here has either heard me talk about it or has already worked with me to get this enabled. It is a huge piece of the puzzle. The ability to say, when I'm logging in to my 365 account from a device that is unknown to that account, I have to have a second device. And I use my cell phone, and it gives me a text, or I use the Microsoft app, and it's a quick prompt, and it just puts a second layer of protection in there when I'm trying to gain access to my emails. It is included with every single Microsoft account, every single license level. If you don't have that in place today, talk to the team. Let's get that taken care of, because that is step number one for most people, is making sure that multi-factor is plugged in. So, Greg, you got anything else you wanted to add to the?
Yeah, so I'll add to that, Floyd. Thanks, I appreciate that. I was going to jump in. Is when Floyd's talking about this stuff, it's not just talking about the executives. It's not just talking about maybe the finance people or CEO or CEO. It's really talking about all the employees, because when these attacks happen, phishing attacks, they're looking for weak links. So they'll email just about anybody inside the organization, whether it's like a part IT person or a super user or whatever, they don't know. They're attacking everyone. And if anyone inside of your organization has any level of access or communication with an executive, which is what happened to this one company we talked about, they will get into a certain person and then keep waiting until they see some emails from those executives and start working backwards. And we'll talk more about that next week, about what that looks like from a cyber insurance perspective and kind of a broad conversation with that. But I just want to add that as well. It's not just the executive, it's really everybody that we think about and Microsoft thinks about when it comes to security in Office 365.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. So another scenario, uh, you're in charge of that sensitive information and you've hit the send button and it's gone somewhere and you didn't realize it went somewhere that you shouldn't have sent it to. So 365 gives us the ability to create policies and use programs within that platform to keep better track of where your data is at. So if it's getting into the wrong hands and you're unaware of it, or it's maybe something that you are aware of, how many times have I sent something out and somebody replies back and says, hey, I don't think this is for me. Usually not a big deal. But if it happened to be like social security numbers or sensitive financial data, that's kind of important, right? So adding that layer into the documents that you're attaching or the emails themselves are all features of Microsoft's 365 platform. So the ability to encrypt emails, the ability to say, hey, this is an attachment that's designated for this person, adds another layer in there. And so if you've got areas where you want to lock down particular communications within your organization, where you can actually set certain rules, it's intelligent. So the ability for it to go and look at the type of email you're sending and say, hey, we think we see a social security number in this attachment, or hey, we think we see credit card information and things like that, that you can actually use Microsoft's platform to set up rules around those types of attachments or types of content inside of your email, and it will automatically add encryption to that email as it's going out. So there's a lot of neat additional, what I would consider advanced features that can get added in there. So if you've got a business process that is interacting with a lot of sensitive information and you want to take another step to locking that down a little bit further to make sure there isn't going to be an event that you have to go back and disclose to people that sensitive information has gotten lost, let me know. We can talk more about that.
Floyd, if I can add to that. So I see Pat's on there. I don't know if he's listening or not, if he's just hanging out, but me at Pearl, right, being one of the owners, I email our bank regularly. I have to email vendors that we do business with, and I am emailing, information about our business. I'm emailing sometimes social security information, bank routing information, these sort of things. So Floyd's really hitting on a really key thing, that what Microsoft has done now, they make it really easy and really intuitive when you're using the platform to encrypt those documents. We use it today. We actually have it enabled today. We can email things internally. And I'm trying to work through getting it done for externally as well. So when I email the bank, they've got to go through a process to be able to see that other email. So it's important and it's there. And I think Floyd, I don't know if you're going to get into more detail about that specific sort of thing today, but it's important to understand that that's available and there. And I would highly recommend talking about how do we make that more secure from an email setting outside your organization perspective.
Thanks, Greg. So Will, you threw a great question out there, and the question is, can 365 automatically look at the shares or links sent out through OneDrive and SharePoint for sensitive information? So what Will's referring to, so for those of you that have taken advantage of SharePoint, and Barb, I know you're a big fan, right? You moved your entire organization to SharePoint this last year. As you're interacting with those files, you can reference them inside of an email. You can essentially share them with somebody else in your organization without actually sending the document. What's great about that is that now you both are referencing the same source of truth. How many times have we sent attachments and emails, and all of a sudden there's 6 different versions of that document floating around? Well, 365 gives us SharePoint and OneDrive, which allows us to do that. The question around whether or not it can analyze the attachments or the attached link for sensitive information and build out the rules there, I don't know specifically if that's a feature of that what I would consider automated piece of the puzzle. I do know that there is information protection rules that you can put on SharePoint and OneDrive itself to help combat against some of that and really lock down those files. So if somebody were to open that file, they wouldn't be able to download it, or if they did download it, they could only read it for a day, and then it would lock it back out after that time on their local computer. So there's definitely some advanced features inside of SharePoint that you can take advantage of there. But I'll take that down, Will, as an action item and look at that a little bit closer to see if that's something that can be included in the rule. I would like to say that, yeah, it should be able to, because it is part of the Microsoft stack. But it is another layer of scanning that's got to go on. So I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I can get back to you on it.
Yeah, there's some stuff around information rights management stuff too, Floyd, that we can look at for that specifically.
Yeah, and we use we have one really large company that does a lot of health information, and they've taken a lot of they've taken some pretty big steps to put IRM, information rights management, as part of their SharePoint story there. So, locking out the ability to print and do other things, and obviously anybody can pick up a phone and take a screenshot of what's going on there. But that's somebody's really taken an effort to steal data, which there's generally internal policies around that. But what's great about the IRM stuff is it really keeps honest people honest, right? It gives you the ability to really track that data. So we talked a little about this already. We're encrypting sensitive emails. We're blocking the sharing of that sensitive information. The other piece that I didn't mention yet, but as you grow as an organization, they have this concept of legal holds and long-term archiving of data. We all saw it with gosh, I'm not going to get political, but there was a certain individual who had their own server and they deleted things off that server, and that's not okay. So the Exchange environment up in the cloud gives you the ability to have unlimited archiving if that's something that you need to have part of your story. So again, these are all things that we can dig into for your organization to understand a little bit better what's gonna make the most sense for you. So this is a really funny one to me. Has anybody really ever lost their phone lately and not realized it within like 3 or 4 seconds? I mean, like I'll get out of my truck and it'll have been sitting in the console, and I'll get inside the house and like, oh, phone. It's like it's literally almost an extension of yourself, right? But I could see things like tablets. I can see things like laptops potentially getting misplaced. And maybe I'm a little different than other folks, but the reality is that we are so connected through these devices that we carry around with us. But those devices, unlike ever before, have an unbelievable amount of corporate business data on them. And if someone is looking to maliciously attack my organization, that device is an amazing way to do it, right? If I could get access to that, then I could have access to your email. I could probably change your password. I could do all kinds of things that probably should not be allowed by somebody that's not part of the organization. But here's what's great. Microsoft has a stack, and again, it starts at the lowest level, giving you a certain amount of control. What we don't see a lot of anymore is corporate devices in addition to your personal device. Again, back in the day, here's my business phone, and then here's my cell phone for personal use, and there the twain shall meet, right? Well, now people don't want to carry around multiple devices. So for the most part, what they're doing is here's your personal device, and we're going to go ahead and put corporate data on that. Well, now as a business owner, I don't really have control over that device that's going there. But what's great is that 365 has given me the ability to require certain policies to be in place for that device to actually access my data. You can go and just for starters, does that device have a PIN or a passcode to get into it when it's locked? If not, guess what? You're not putting my 365 account on there. It's going to check for that when it gets in there. If I want to take it to the next level and say, hey, we need your device to be encrypted, it's going to ask that you encrypt that device as you go forward. Now, again, there's that gray area between this is my device, but it's corporate data. What happens when this person's no longer part of the organization or they've lost that device? Well, as a corporate owner of that data, I want to be able to go out and delete what's on that device that is part of my business, right? So 365 gives you that ability to go out and essentially choose to delete all the corporate data off of that device, which is pretty amazing. But beyond that, some folks find it to be a little bit scary to put my corporate data inside of the email account that's also being used for Gmail or for my iPhone and things like that. So instead of allowing users to use that native email app, Microsoft can actually put essentially a policy in place inside of your 365 that says, guess what, your email doesn't get to be read through that email app. You actually have to load the Microsoft approved Outlook application, and it increases that security level that your user is experiencing by essentially using that Microsoft app directly to gain access to that email. In addition to that, there's other products that allow us to enforce password policies. You can actually bring your devices into the Microsoft cloud and treat them almost as though they were in that same type of traditional corporate environment, right? So if back in, when I would sit down at my office desk and I would log in, scripts would run and drives would map and things would be affected by my IT group on my desktop. Well, Microsoft says, people are doing remote work everywhere. We want to give you the ability to push those same policies using our tool as well. So they created a product called Intune. It's been around for years, but it's gotten a lot better in the last couple, and it really allows a much more granular level of control over that device from the cloud, which is really a godsend because it really allows you to get better visibility into what's going on. So, Greg, anything you wanted to add to that, man?
No, that was awesome. I like that. I'm glad you mentioned Intune. So.
Okay, so 365 business, we've been talking about it the whole entire time, right? So Microsoft's gone through and listed a couple of the items here. We talked a little bit about advanced threat protection. We talked about Defender for 365. We talked about the multi-factor authentication, all these other pieces that are really important to us. But at the end of the day, what's important to remember is that you've got a very sophisticated group of people that are minding the store. It's not down to one individual that's sitting in the back office that's patching your Exchange server or making sure that there's antivirus definitions are up to date. This is Microsoft's business. They have designed the 365 platform, and they are absolutely taking a security first posture with all that. We see patch releases all the time. It's part of the overall plan that we've got for our clients is to make sure things are up to date. Well, Microsoft does the exact same thing with their platform. So allows you to control your data, and it allows you to really manage those devices. So they really are coming at it from every angle to make sure that using their platform is just it's just the direction that makes sense for folks that are doing business, especially in a small business where from a cost perspective, you can't even begin to compare the value to the cost that they're giving you. So I love this slide. It gives you an idea of the scope of what you're interacting with, right? So I mentioned earlier, looks like the stat is 470 billion emails analyzed every single month. So that's really cool. The next one over, 6.5 trillion threat signal. So a threat signal is essentially that behavior that we talked a little bit about. It's who's logging in to the environment where, who is creating rules, who is accessing this data. It's constant, and again, being part of the bigger pool of people that are contributing to the knowledge is ultimately going to help make your environment more secure. So over 90% or 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have already signed in to Microsoft 365 platform. There's a ton of applications that are out there. There's a ton of 5 billion threats detected on devices every month. There's just a really big community of people that are essentially all contributing. We talk about Google Maps and how Google Maps is so amazing. Well, it's amazing because everybody that has a phone is contributing to how amazing that is, right? The same theory is true around the 365 platform. In some way, shape, or form, we're all contributing to the global knowledge of how to make our environments more secure. And it's not perfect. There's still things that are going to pop through. There's still events that are going to occur. But being part of this bigger entity has really proven valuable to a lot of my clients. And I think most everybody that's on this phone today or on the call today has experienced that as well. So Greg, any thoughts on that while we are looking at this amazing slide of all the bubble charts?
No, one thing I think you mentioned lightly that I think is important to reiterate is that the one thing that this platform does allow us is a ton of third-party companies that are building solutions on top of it in lots of different scenarios. So if there's a scenario that you have in your organization when it comes to email or anything like that, or any of your Word documents or whatever, let us know. If it's a very interesting thing, and there's probably a partner in the Microsoft ecosystems, they call it, that could probably have a tool or a product that can help that fits seamlessly within the tools that you're using today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's classic Microsoft, right? So, for those of you that don't know, Greg and I were part of another Microsoft partner company before, and the whole business is built around gaps that Microsoft will tend to leave in their products because it's very industry specific. And I don't think the 365 platform is any different. So it's a great segue. I don't even know if Greg knew this was the next slide.
Oh, perfect.
But we've taken cybersecurity to another level at Pearl over this last year. Had some really great conversations with a lot of our customers. We spent a significant amount of time digging into third-party products that would make sense to add into our suite. And we've got a really neat PDF that I can send anybody that wants to look at it. But there's essentially, we've identified 15 different points. And it's everything from firewalls to your corporate data getting backed up to things like you really need to have a cybersecurity assessment done. You know, you need to understand what that baseline security piece looks like. And we can help you identify, okay, this is good here, but for the business that you're running, here's a gap we've identified. Here's what we would suggest doing to shore that up. And some of it's as simple as, hey, let's make sure you got a password policy in place, right? Let's make sure that you've got multi-factor authentication. But some things get a little bit more advanced, right? So we look at some of these other products, dark web credential monitoring. This is a really almost scary thing. So I haven't seen a lot of it lately, but a couple of years ago, there was a rash of emails that were going out, and they were literally putting people's old passwords in the email and say, hey, so-and-so, here's your login, here's your password, and we know what you've been doing. We're going to tell everybody about it, you know, and it was never true. It was all very scripted. But the bottom line is those passwords were real. And people were like, man, how did they get my password? I'm like, well, that's the dark web for you. So we partner with a company called ID Agent that does dark web monitoring, and they actually take and look through a bunch of databases in the dark web to identify which one of credentials within your domain have been compromised. And it's a regular report that comes through, and as new things pop in, they send us an alert. It ends up in our security queue. We review it with the customer if there's a password that's there. Frankly, 8, 9 times out of 10, that password is not even a current password. Okay, no blood, no foul. But when we hit the ones that say, hey, this is a current password for a current user inside of my organization, well, guess that's a red flag. And we need to make sure that that stuff gets changed. So dark web credential monitoring is a big piece of one of the pieces that we added on to our security stack. Cybersecurity awareness training. This is something, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's not a very expensive product. But users, when they're getting tested in real time, that's not the time you want to figure out that you've got a problem, right? You want to test them in, in a secured environment that's going to give you statistics, right? Hey, we sent, and I will preface that by saying there's training that says, hey, here's what you look out for, quick hit videos that your team can look at throughout the course of, and we generally set a program up on a 6-month basis and see how things go. Giving them that type of training that helps them become more aware of the threats that they're going to be encountering, and then going so far as to go ahead and let's test them a little bit. Hey, did they open the email? Did they click on the link in the email? Did they get so far as providing credentials? And we can tell you at what level the different folks inside of your organization went to. And it's just very beneficial for you to be able to take a step back and say, okay, what did you not understand? Why would you go through this process? And just like anything else, when you're top of mind, it's going to cause people to be a little bit more cautious about how they're interacting with those emails that are coming through. It's a huge part of making sure that you don't get compromised. The last one I've got on my list here, and this one is, it's an amazing product, and there's a lot of them that are out there. We've partnered with a company called Blackpoint. And this is called Managed Detection and Response. And what I love about the Blackpoint product is they've got an agent that runs on your servers and your workstations, but they also have a component that plugs into Microsoft's 365 platform and watches for behaviors up there. The entire idea behind MDR is behavioral statistics, right? It's the ability to say, hey, what's going on inside of your environment that is part of your normal day-to-day? And then when there's a blip that occurs, so I'll give an example. Let's say the person that is working out on the warehouse floor, their credentials for some reason are being used to try to access the financial accounting share. That doesn't make sense. The MDR product's job is to notice when those things are occurring, or someone's trying to gain access to your VDI, your virtual desktop interface, from a country you don't even work in. In Office 365, someone set up forwarding rules, or somebody's added themselves as an admin to your portal, things like that. MDR is there to watch that behavior. It's hey, here's antivirus up here, and it's known definitions. It's things that have happened in the past. MDR is that next layer below that says, hey, we're just kind of watching how things are going and paying attention to what's maybe changing inside of your organization. So we're really excited about that. We tried for years, Greg, let me tell you, like to dig into different what we call SIM products and build our own cybersecurity SOC, but it's a pretty big deal. And so by partnering with an organization that's designed to work with managed services providers, we're able to offer, again, just like Microsoft, where you've got this value of the many contributing to even the small businesses. That's what the Blackpoint product is doing as well. So these are just 4 of the items that I thought I'd highlight a little bit today in our cybersecurity stack that goes beyond what that Microsoft product is actually providing to you. All there for open discussions. Most of these we've actually had webinars on this year already. So Cindy, I assume they can get a hold of that on the website, right? Out there, there's a couple of spots where you can get a hold of our old webinars that deep dives a little bit more into. We had the vendors join us for those, talk a little bit more about the dark web, some scary stuff there, and then all the other pieces as well. So Greg, do you have anything you want to add to this page?
Yeah, how hard it would be for you to pull up the other document that the 15 points that we have. So the only thing I'd mention as Floyd's bringing that up is there's no magic bullet, right? Security is complicated, and there's no one product. And yeah, I see it. There's no one product on the market that does it. And so we take a layered approach, right? We try to look at every single area that possibly could be affected and try to find a tool that can help protect us. Again, it doesn't guarantee it, but what's really Floyd's showing you is our approach, right? If you keep scrolling down, Floyd, there's like almost what we call 15 different areas that are impacted, right? These products get very good at, like, one's called Zero Trust. I won't get into it. It's complicated, Floyd, to tell you, but is very specific in what it does, right? Dark web searching research, it does very specific. Mobile device management, Floyd talked about it. Email, Floyd talked about it. Backup, Floyd, we talked about it in the past. All these things matter, and they all do matter, and you have to do something with all of them. And so that's why you kind of have to have a cybersecurity strategy or a partner like us that does that for you. Because if someone's telling you they have the answer and there's one product, don't believe them, right? There's some very basic things about even just with email or passwords or whatever. So I just wanted to share that and add that to Floyd. So, you kind of talk about those 4 things. Those are important, but there's a lot of other things that matter. And like Floyd said, we're doing a series of webinars that touch on the different products, and we're going to continue them and do really one around each one. Next month is cyber insurance that I'm doing with a cyber security insurance broker, an expert in the market. We'll have some more stats, and we're going to cover some dark web stuff a little more from a high level business perspective. Pat, you'll probably appreciate that one. But I just wanted to share that, Floyd, to make sure that people understood that it's not just one product.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that, Greg. That's absolutely true. And the assessment is it's what's key for being able to understand, okay, where are we with our firewall protection? Where are we with patch management? Where are we with backups and disaster recovery? These are all part of the opportunity that we have to get in there before you've got an oh no moment, and help you shore up any gaps that you might have. One that I like here that I didn't put on the other slide, but is very important with this advent of remote workers that is proliferated our entire environment in the last year and a half, is this web gateway security. So you're here inside of this corporate environment, and the firewall is protecting you from going to malicious places. But the second you leave, you no longer have that layer of protection. That corporate managed firewall is such an important piece of the puzzle. Well, being able to add security gateways to people's devices as they take them and go into other environments, whether it be their home or the coffee shop, is a hugely valuable product to add into that overall portfolio of what you're doing. So anyway, thanks, Greg. I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right. Man, we are almost at the end. I appreciate everybody hanging in with me and listening in. But so security in the cloud, 365. This is my information. Most of you, we've either talked or you've seen my emails come across and things like that. I'm easy to get a hold of. I put my main number on here. If you ever need anything, please email me directly. Email my team at support@pearlsolves.com. It's in everybody's best interest to do as much as we can to combat against the threat actors that are out there today, and to take care of our treasure. I've heard of stories where companies have gotten hit by ransomware or hit by some sort of attack, and they just throw in the towel. They're done because they can't afford the $80,000. They can't afford the $120,000 payout that it's going to take to recover back to the point where they were before the attack occurred. So take a minute, take a step back, have a conversation. Let's figure out what makes the most sense for you going forward to get you as secure as possible, and take advantage of these products that Microsoft has put out there. And that's it. We made it. So this is that point where I'm like, okay, open forum. I know you all have been really quiet this whole entire time. We'll appreciate the one question. Is there anything else that we kind of open the floor up? I'll be the first person to tell you, I am not a 100% expert in the Microsoft stack. There are so many different products that Microsoft has part of that. And that's why I have an amazing team of people that help me deliver on those products. But I can take a stab, and if we need to take some notes and get back to anybody, I can certainly do that. So open up the floor. Anyone have any questions or comments about what we're talking about today?
I got a few questions. One of the big problems that we have over here is we've got a lot of developers who are doing some pretty interesting stuff with virtualization and containers and all that jazz on their boxes. And a lot of the security tools actually impede their ability to do some of those activities. And I don't know if are there specific tools that are especially for like a developer's box like that, or is there a kind of a different situation that we should be putting their machines in, so that they can continue to be secure but not have their work impeded by the ability to like spin up these containers and all that stuff?
Gotcha. So something that I've seen more and more of, and we are digging into it a little bit more too, and I touched on it real briefly, is that Microsoft released a product called I think it's Windows 365. And I truly see this being the direction that a lot of even small business people will end up going, because to your point, I need to secure that endpoint as much as possible, but I also don't want to prohibit somebody from being able to do work. Well, the best of both worlds is to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give you access into a controlled environment that has all the access that you need with it, but I trust how I'm handling that firewall, and I'm trusting how I do these kinds of things inside of this virtualized environment. So I've got one client who is, again, healthcare, has taken the initiative to say, okay, if you're going to access healthcare data, you've got to be inside of a VDI environment. And Microsoft's released GPU, which would be interesting to you, Ralph, because it increases the performance like a millionfold. But they've got GPU enabled virtual desktop environments so that you can do all kinds of, you can actually play video games in there if you wanted to, but for business, we'll go and say it's AutoCAD, or it's development, or it's rendering, or things like that. And so Microsoft recognizes that the ability for my IT group to control that experience and surface it to the end user might be the direction that makes the most sense for people. But I totally get what you're saying. I think if we've got specific points, I know especially with you guys, we've had issues with the antivirus software is too restrictive or it causes problems. And so we pulled that off. And I think, Will, you're on the call too, right? Like it's like your developers need the ultimate in performance. Where do you balance that with security? So it's tricky. I would say within the next couple of years, we will see more and more of, hey, we don't really care what you're using to access this virtual desktop environment, because we're essentially going to limit your ability to pull any data back out of it.
Cool.
Good question. Anybody else got I think we got a couple more minutes here on the hour before we jump into everybody's lunchtime. Thoughts, comments? Okay.
Hey, Floyd, are you guys conducting those cybersecurity assessments, or do you use a third party for that?
So Will, that is something we are doing on our own. We
Okay.
come in with the team, and I've got a gentleman that is been in the corporate environment for a long time. You've probably never met him, but works a lot with some of our customers around audits, and has helped out with doing things like HIPAA compliance audits and PCI compliance audits, RFPs, things like that. So he and I work together to go into a customer and really dig into those 15 points that we listed there and understand how does that look for the customer and maybe identify some of those gaps. And then we've got a tool that we use as well that that helps us do some basic scanning and some other things too. So if that's something we want to talk about, Will, we can take that offline and dig into it a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I was also curious if you had any like like sample outputs. Like what's the takeaway from one of those things? If you had like I know you couldn't show like something you've already done, but something to be illustrative of the type of information that would come out of the report or the finding.
Sure. Yeah. I would have to put something together and kind of, I'd have to white label that for you. So I don't have anything I can pull up right this second, but
Sure.
depending on, and again, some of that will depends on what is it being used for, right? So full disclosure, there's this need for cybersecurity, and the insurance agencies are saying, hey, here, we need this data pulled back out. So we're going to be delivering things in that format for them. Or if you're going into an RFP situation and that RFP is looking for something, we'll maybe customize it around that. So otherwise, we've got reports that are generated outside of the actual analysis tools, and then we've just got our template that we use for all the data to put it all together and essentially bring it to you in a format that is a little bit more easily digestible, as opposed to a lot of ones and zeros, if you will.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, we are right at the hour. I appreciate everybody taking some time out of their day. I hope everybody's doing well. It's good to see a couple of you and hear from even more. So if you have any more questions, again, reach out to us, phone, email, carrier pigeon, whatever makes the most sense for you. And we'll be sure to get back to you and talk some more about how we can work together. So appreciate everybody taking time today. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.